Tonight, a win for religious freedom. The Supreme Court rules a Catholic charity in Wisconsin does not have to pay state unemployment taxes, what the case means for faith groups across the country. Plus, from negotiations with China to a new travel ban spanning more than a dozen countries, President Trump makes major moves on the world stage. We break down the latest from the White House. And after more than 600 days,
it's another moment of tragedy.
Israel recovers the bodies of 2 Israeli-American hostages taken by Hamas on October 7, 2023. The fight to bring every hostage home as the war in Gaza rages on. Plus, a new study raising alarms. Emergency room visits after chemical abortions coded as miscarriages. Why researchers call it a public health crisis and a threat to women's safety. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The Supreme Court sides with a Catholic charity in a major case about religious freedom. Good evening from our Washington News Bureau. I'm John Jessup. Welcome to Faith Nation. While a Catholic charity in Wisconsin does not have to pay unemployment taxes, that's the unanimous ruling from the High Court saying the state violated the group's First Amendment rights. The Catholic Charities Bureau says it was being treated unfairly and forced to pay a tax from which other religious groups were exempted. Wisconsin claimed the charity's work wasn't religious enough, but the justices disagreed. Joining me now to help break down the ruling, Mark Caleb Smith, who serves as the director of the Center for Political Studies at Cedarville University in Ohio. Mark, welcome back to Faith Nation. So this was a unanimous decision from the Supreme Court, which is rare these days. And I should also mention that this is just one of several major First Amendment cases the court is tackling this term. Mark, I guess I want to just start off by your general impression based on today's ruling, what it means for not just this case, but maybe other religious employers.
I think the fact that it is unanimous is probably pretty important, not just because it shows that the court was unified, but because this is a pretty easy issue. When you look at the legal facts that are at work here and the question as the court sort of put it together, this was not a difficult decision to reach. Justice Sotomayor wrote the opinion for the court. She's generally on the other side of the people that we might call the religious conservatives who are the most protective of religious liberty. And so the fact that she wrote it and the fact that it's unanimous, I think, says a lot about the case, but also says a lot about the court. I think there's a real sense that we're in a pretty delicate cultural moment, and I'm sure they're going to be trying for unanimity if it's at all possible.
Speaking of that cultural moment and the sensitivity here, so Wisconsin argued that the charity did not qualify for an exemption because of its day-to-day work not involving religious teaching. They also said that the people that they served and the people that they employed came from different faiths or no faiths at all. So do you think today's ruling will give governments, local, city, municipal, federal governments, second thought before they engage in the business of defining what's religious or not religious enough?
Yeah, I think that I think it probably will send a particular message to state and local governments, but it's also true that this is a pretty unusual case. I mean, even in the oral arguments, Wisconsin admitted if this had simply been the Catholic Church doing this, they would have gotten the exemption. But since this was a separate corporate entity that the Catholic Church had set up in Wisconsin, then they used a different standard. And I think that's really where the difficulty came in for the state. And so, yeah, I think that it will be communicative in a way, but this is a pretty unusual set of facts, I think. And so I'm not sure how broad the impact will really be.
I want to ask you before we go about another major case today involving what's called a reverse workplace discrimination case where an Ohio woman said that she was demoted because she's straight. The Supreme Court took her side, and again, this was a unanimous decision. Can you walk us through what the court decided here and what this means for workplace discrimination claims going forward?
Yeah, the basic issue was whether or not someone who's part of a quote-unquote majority culture has to have a higher standard they have to meet in order to prove discrimination. And so she, as a straight woman, was arguing that her sexual orientation was being used against her by a homosexual boss who was also promoting homosexuals into positions that she was qualified for. And the lower courts had said she'd have to meet a higher standard in order to prove discrimination. The Supreme Court very clearly and unanimously said, no, that's not true. Just because she's straight, or in other circumstances, just because she's white, for instance, you don't have to go through a different process to prove discrimination. And so, again, not really a surprise, a really weird case, but one we also see unity on the court.
All right, Dr. Mark Caleb Smith with Cedarville University, we always appreciate you joining us to help break things down.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Well, while the Supreme Court hands down decisions on major cases affecting religious rights, President Trump is making headlines of his own, from instituting a new travel ban to a high-stakes call with China's President Xi Jinping, as ongoing tensions over trade are far from fading. Joining me now, CBN White House correspondent Kelly Wright and Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor. Gentlemen, welcome back. It's good to see you both. So let's start with this war of words between the world's most powerful man and the world's richest man. Elon Musk ramping up his criticism of the president's big, beautiful bill today, saying that the president would not have been back in the White House if it were not for Elon Musk, then insinuating that Mr. Trump is ungrateful. Donald Trump then responded by saying that he's very disappointed in Elon Musk and then threatened to cancel Musk's government contracts. Nathan, I'll start with you. What's going on, and how might this affect the prospects of the GOP-controlled Congress advancing this must-pass bill?
Yeah, we're seeing an ugly end to one of the largest profile relationships in the world. Both Elon and President Trump are used to being the smartest and most powerful person in any room, and right now they are publicly trying to claim that mantle. It's almost surprising that the relationship worked as long as it did based on their egos, frankly, but there was mutual benefit. Elon helped spend millions of dollars to help President Trump get elected. And he also gave President Trump some credibility in exercising the DOGE, and cutting government spending. And with Trump gave Elon access to all levels of government and gave him a platform that he's never had before. But now Elon flew a little bit too close, got a little bit too much attention, and now it is really disintegrating to, you're right, President Trump threatening to cancel contracts, and Elon even suggesting that President Trump is in the Epstein file. So it is getting ugly, and I don't think it's over.
Kelly, this is a far cry from where we were last week when Elon Musk had the ceremony in the White House and received the golden key to the White House.
Let's go somewhere where many people are not going, and that's the reaction among the American people, particularly those who support President Donald Trump. They are going on Truth Social with responses to the president saying they believe in President Trump, and they also believe and support Elon Musk, and they're basically saying that these two billionaires need to make peace and settle this over a telephone rather than in the public eye. The other thing that's being said is that two adults need to stand up and actually look beyond their egos and really do what's best for the country and not be involved in a feud that could ruin what both of them are trying to achieve.
Speaking of telephones, Kelly, some potentially promising news on the trade front for the Trump White House today. The president having what he called a good talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping. What can you tell us more about that conversation and what it means for the prospects of these ongoing trade talks?
Yeah, indeed, the president talked about the fact that he had met with President Xi of China, and he discussed that during the Oval Office meeting when German Chancellor Friedrich Merz was there. And he went on to say that it was a good meeting, that the two of them have agreed to move forward with discussing their trade deals. He even went on so far as to say the conversation was focused almost entirely on trade. Nothing was discussed concerning Russia, Ukraine, or Iran. And he basically said that that'll inform the media as to scheduling a location of the soon-to-be meeting between them. And he mentioned that he invited President Xi to this country along with the First Lady of China, and that invitation was reciprocated to President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump.
I want to talk to both of you real quickly about something that the president brought back, a little bit of a relic from his first term, the travel ban and partial travel ban for people from 19 different countries. Kelly and Nathan, can you talk a little bit about that decision and maybe why those particular countries? And I'll let you go first, Kelly, since you're there at the White House.
So the president, again, during that Oval Office meeting with the German chancellor, went on to say that he does not want people in this country who mean to do the country harm by carrying out any particular terrorist plot against the people in the homeland. To that end, he reissued his travel ban that was instituted during his last presidency. And you recall that during that time in 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court actually supported that travel ban. Well, he's doing it once again, and he doesn't expect any reprisals from anyone in the country. He believes that he's protecting the homeland by instituting this. Any backlash potentially for the president here, Nathan?
No, I think the curious thing, I think it fits neatly within the policy that the president has had, but it's curious that it comes on the heels of the attack in Boulder, which was the allegations, that someone from Egypt was the one who perpetrated those attacks, and yet Egypt was not on the list of countries that's on the travel ban. So that's still an unanswered question.
Yeah, and let me just add to that in terms of backlash. There is some backlash coming from Army or military veterans who served in Afghanistan. They're concerned about the Afghan refugees who helped many of the American military operate in a 20-year-long war. And so they're reaching out to the president stating that there are Afghans in this country who need to be taken care of.
Before I walked in, I heard a report, an Afghan veteran who actually was talking about the contradiction of why last week or a couple of weeks ago the Trump administration removed the temporary visas for Afghans, saying that Afghanistan was safe, yet Afghanistan is on this list of countries. Real quickly, we only have a minute left. I want to talk to you about President Trump launching an investigation into his predecessor, Joe Biden, for his use of the auto pen. Nathan, real quickly, what's the motivation here, given the fact that President Trump and other presidents have used the auto pen?
Yeah, irony or hypocrisy is sometimes lost on the administration. I mean, this is about punishing political enemies, people that the president thinks has been either an enemy or disloyal to him. He's going to use everything within his power to try to bring them to account or make their lives more miserable. And so this is sadly, I think, par for the course for the president.
Final thought from you, Kelly, at the White House.
So look, let me state very clearly what the president says about this. He believes that what happened with the use of the auto pen is that, as he claims, President Joe Biden was not aware of everything that was being signed, some of the documents that were being signed by an auto pen, and he says you can tell when it's happening, and he believes that it's disrespectful to the American public and illegal. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Nathan Gonzalez and Kelly Wright, thank you both for spending time with us this evening. Coming up, the latest on Israel's mission to bring October 7th hostages back home and the Israeli ambassador's message to the media. That's next. Welcome back. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming Israel activated some local Palestinian clans in Gaza to join the fight against Hamas. He says the move will help save Israeli lives, but some Israeli leaders have voiced skepticism over arming local groups in Gaza. The announcement follows a bitter update from the military overnight recovering the bodies of 2 American Israeli hostages. Netanyahu vowing Israel won't rest until all the hostages come back home. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with more on the ongoing war against Hamas. Caitlin, clearly a very difficult discovery overnight.
That's right, John. The 2 recovered bodies belong to an American husband and wife, Judy Weinstein and Gadi Haggai. After more than 600 days, their remains are now back in Israel.
Judy and Gadi were 2 of the 14 hostages from our kibbutz, from our small community, that remained of the 58. And the return of their bodies, over 600 days too late, is the starkest possible reminder that Israel has a huge moral and national spiritual responsibility to get all of the hostages home.
Weinstein and Haggai were both murdered on October 7th in kibbutz Nir Oz. Their bodies then held in Gaza by the same group responsible for the murders of Shiri Bibas and her 2 small children. Of the 56 hostages remaining in captivity, only 20 are believed to still be alive.
U.S. opposition to this resolution should come as no surprise.
On Wednesday, the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for a permanent and unconditional ceasefire in the war between Israel and Gaza because it didn't demand Hamas disarm or release the remaining hostages.
The United States has been clear. We would not support any measure that fails to condemn Hamas and does not call for Hamas to disarm and leave Gaza.
That vote followed a decision by an Israeli and U.S.-backed foundation to pause food delivery in Gaza after civilians died in a series of shootings this week. Hamas blames Israel for the deaths. The IDF, meanwhile, released drone footage accusing Hamas of the attack. Yakil Leiter, Israel's ambassador to the U.S., tells CBN News it's dangerous for Western media to continue promoting the narrative of a terrorist organization.
Why in the world would Israeli soldiers, after we go to the extreme trouble of setting up distribution sites for humanitarian aid, why in the world will our soldiers fire on the people waiting in line? What they're doing by repeating this, ad nauseum, these accusations, is they're fueling the flames of the deranged among the public who are going to take a gun or a flamethrower or a knife or whatever it may be and attack people. Stop the blood libel. That's the beginning of stopping the rise of anti-Semitism.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues attempts to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran, but time is running out. President Trump originally gave negotiators 2 months to come up with a deal, and that deadline expires next week. In a Truth Social post, Trump accused Iran of, quote, slow-walking their decision, which he says he'll need in a very short period of time. John?
All right, national security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you, Caitlin. Medical miscoding. The findings of a new study raising questions about the safety of medical abortions. Next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. A new study is raising alarm bells about the safety of drugs used for abortions and how complications from those procedures are being reported in emergency rooms across the country. The study purports a staggering number of women who ended up in the ER after taking abortion pills were misclassified as cases of miscarriage, sometimes with life-threatening symptoms. The authors argue this is more than a paperwork problem, rather a public health crisis that puts women at serious risk. Joining us now is one of the lead researchers behind the study, Dr. Ingrid Skopp, Vice President and Director of Medical Affairs for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Dr. Skopp, welcome back to Faith Nation. So your study came out late last month, as I understand, and just yesterday, the Trump administration reversed Biden-era federal guidance requiring hospitals to provide abortions as part of their emergency care. We'll get to that if we have some time in a moment. So that we're all on the same page, though, can you talk to us about miscoding and what that means, what it is, and why your team decided to look at the issue?
Yes, to back up, it's important to know that 63% of abortions in our country, over 1 million a year, they say are happening. 630,000 medication abortions are occurring. They're increasingly being promoted to women, even though we know that there are 4 times as many complications. At the same time, the FDA has removed critical safeguards so that these drugs are being mailed to women and to men who request them on the internet, and there often is no medical supervision. Also, the abortion industry is telling women if they should need to be seen in an emergency room, that they don't have to tell the doctors, that they won't be able to tell the difference. They can pretend it's a miscarriage. And good quality studies tell us that 1 out of 20, maybe as many as 1 out of 10 women who take these drugs end up in an emergency room. So with that background,
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, with that background, we did a records linkage study. We knew the abortions that were paid for by insurance, and then were able to see what medical events occurred afterwards. And we discovered that increasingly, these are being miscoded as having been due to a miscarriage. We did a prior study up to 2015 in which we documented that 45% of the time complications from abortion drugs were coded as a miscarriage. This most recent study demonstrated that 90% of the time they were miscoded. So really the ability to know any data is increasingly going away.
So if my math is right, that's almost a doubling from 45 to 90%. I got to ask you, though, how much is the miscoding rise potentially a response to the Dobbs Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade? How much of that essentially is perhaps motivated by a fear of any legal action, perceived or real, against patients seeking abortions or physicians in states where abortion has been banned? Did you look into how that might factor into a correlation or causation?
We do know that pro-abortion media and pro-abortion medical organizations are increasingly trying to promote fear. There is no state in our country that will prosecute a woman who obtains an abortion, but they are promoting this narrative that it might happen in order to keep people from reporting. But again, they're straight out telling women that they don't have to tell about the abortion. And it puts the doctors at a disadvantage. Our prior study demonstrated that these women had 3 visits before they got the treatment that they needed, which was usually surgery to remove retained pregnancy tissue. Sometimes the abortion industry will say it doesn't matter that these women are going to an emergency room, they're just going for reassurance. Well, I think we all recognize, as expensive as the emergency room is, that's an inappropriate place to get reassurance when they could go back to the abortion provider. But this study also demonstrated that 70% of the time these women who were presenting with complications had a severe or life-threatening pregnant code applied to that visit. So these were not women seeking reassurance. Most of these women were in need of help.
That's going to have to be the last word. We are unfortunately out of time. Dr. Ingrid Skop with the Charlotte Lozier Institute, thank you so much for your time and enlightening us with the study results. Well, coming up, why these young kids are getting a first-hand peek at what it takes to be a firefighter. Next. Finally tonight, ever imagine what it would be like to be a firefighter? Well, a program for young kids is making that a reality, even if it's just for a day. Carmel, Indiana's fire department is hosting a hands-on training camp with almost 200 daily participants. The one-day camp is free for kids 7 to 12 years old and includes an obstacle course, which you just saw there, water activities, and games. Off-duty firefighters guide the kids through fire escape planning, CPR training, and real-life scenarios like saving a choking baby.
Kids are saving a baby out of our pool. They've got they're doing some sort of group work trying to crawl through the tunnel together. Over here as we walk, we've got our EMS, which is one of the favorites, our EMS obstacle course.
Area sponsors and off-duty firefighters make the event possible, volunteering their time to make the camp a success. Looks like a lot of fun and a great way to spend your summer. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Faith Nation. We hope to see you again right back here tomorrow. Good night.